Chapter 23. From Fort Psyche, Megatron monitored the reports of Starscream's mission and his relocation of Triptychon Station to a higher orbit. He had to be careful not to spend too much time off-planet and away from the seat of his power in Con. The more he was visible before the rank-and-file Decepticons, the more he was still the gladiator who had risen from the pits. Sentinel Prime had lost the belief of Cybertronians because he had become unreal to them. He had not spent any time with any regular bots, let alone those from the lower castes. It had been teracycles since anyone took caste seriously. If the war ended tomorrow, Megatron could have taken credit for destroying the system, but the lesson remained. Walk among the people you would lead. Megatron lived by this precept. His second precept was that there were times when you had to kill selected members of those groups you desired to lead. So while his darkened strike teams ran the Autobots out of their warrens, he had permitted himself the time to get reacquainted with Con, the Badlands, and Blaster City. Here it had all begun. And here was where his misguided friendship with Irvine Pax had broken. The final confrontation had taken place in the High Council chamber, yes, but the break had begun. The cracks had spread, when Irvine Pax had seen a little slice of the real world that the lower castes inhabited. Megatron did not permit himself to feel regret. If the war had never happened, he would never have been more than a functionary, an agitator for the downtrodden, or he would have receded back into the subsurface world below the Badlands, a former gladiator fallen away from his days of greatness. Looking back from where he stood now, either possibility seemed worse than the death he had always evaded in the pit and on the battlefield. Below him spread the vast army of ex-gladiators and industrial workers who had become his army. They had been there when he went into Fort Psyche to monitor the status of the dual projects up on Triptychon Station and to get reports from strike teams. The war was entering its final stages. Megatron slotted in a fresh ingot of dark energon. The charge of it rocked him and he charged back up and out onto the parapet that ran between the main towers of Fort Psyche. When he burst into the crowd's field of vision, they erupted into the chant that still electrified him the way it had the first time he'd heard it, Megatron. 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 Yes, Decepticons. He called out. Yes. Total victory is at hand. Do you stand ready for a last push to crush the Autobots and claim all of Cybertron for yourselves? The roar that went up shook the foundations of Fort Psyche. I have fought for you. Megatron went on. In battle I have faced down the iron batteries of Polyhex, and I still function. I have gone blade to blade with the elite guard of the High Council, and I still function. I have stood inside the firestorm of a fusion detonation while around me other bots blew away into molten splatters, and I still function. They responded to him as they always did. The ground below the southern wall of Fort Psyche became a thicket of upthrust weapons, and the surface of the Sea of Rust, on whose shores Megatron's supporters were gathered, rippled outward as if their adulation had reversed the tides. Megatron. I still function. Megatron. You must stand ready for a final assault on Eakin. He thundered. Stand ready and I will call. Our victory is at hand. A new Cybertron is at hand. Megatron. He looked from the tower of Fort Psyche out to the west where far beyond the steely horizon lay the city of Eakin, last bastion of the Autobots. It was his final goal, the last hurdle remaining between Megatron and the status of a true Prime. Irvine Pax was not Prime material. What Prime had ever come from the Hall of Records? And Sentinel Prime? His time was past. He had lost Cybertron, and now few living Cybertronians remembered he had existed. When the time came for his elimination, Sentinel Prime would have no one interested in defending him. The only reason Megatron had let him live so long was for the unlikely chance he would need to parade a Prime in front of the grid to claim a legitimacy. That had always been a remote possibility, and now in the light of dark energon it seemed even more improbable. Megatron. There was only room for one Prime. Megatron. The sky over the Badlands looked like it always did, grey and churning. It was time to go up and through it again, to the clean emptiness of space and Triptychon Station. By the time he had reconvened his science team on Triptychon Station, he was expecting a full report on the operational status of the geosynchronous Energon Bridge. Shockwave had stayed up on Triptychon, now in geosynchronous orbit over the focal point of the Energon beam's lens, while Megatron shored up his positions on the perimeter between the Decepticon-held Badlands and the Northern Plains area that reached out in the direction of Yakin and Novachronom. "It's not enough," Catalican said. "We can pipe the Energon up to the station every moment at full capacity, and it's not going to be enough. Your army is too big and the pipeline is." The scientist gestured toward the monitor. "There's not enough." "Yes there is," Soundwave said. "Or there can be, at any rate. If what you want is enough dark Energon for the Decepticon army, you need the plasma energy chamber." Megatron looked from Catalican to Soundwave and back. "Why have I not heard this before?" "We thought it was a myth," Catalican said. Soundwave shook his head. "You thought it was a myth? I told you it was real. Megatron, I knew the plasma energy chamber existed. When I infiltrated Crystal City, long ago, back before the war had really started, my Minicons returned with more information than could be processed right then. One of the things they had evidence of was this plasma energy chamber." Megatron looked at Catalican while Soundwave spoke, until the scientist was visibly terrified. "Go on," Megatron said. "Catalican, listen closely." "Why yes," stammered Catalican. "In and below the city of Yakin," Soundwave said, "there are two code keys, one of power and one of justice. One, justice, lies within the subsurface fortress that contains Teletron 1. The other, power, is elsewhere in Yakin. I have Minicons finding exactly where as we speak." Outside, the devastator winds began to howl. "What does one unlock with these code keys?" Megatron asked. "Both are needed to control the plasma energy chamber," Soundwave said. "I will let our distinguished scientist tell the rest." Catalican jumped at the chance to return to Megatron's good graces. "The stories, which my colleague Soundwave has done so much to confirm, suggest that the bot who controls the two code keys may activate the plasma energy chamber. And the plasma energy chamber, it is said, is the power source for the material of Cybertron itself. Who controls it has an unlimited supply. More than any army of Decepticons could ever find a way to use." "Very good," Megatron said. "That sounds like what I need. Make it happen, Catalican. And this time, listen to what smarter bots around you are saying."
I'm glad you enjoyed that video/gameplay. Just remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, goodbye!